Not only did I manage to catch Nick Peachy's cold yesterday, despite his warnings not to sit near him at the airport, but also one of my shoes overnight mysteriously fell apart. So by the end of this hour I'm going to look and sound rather like a tramp, so I apologise in advance for that. I also have no idea what's on my slides, of course, because it's just there behind me. So, I'm assuming it's good. Stop doing that. Right, should we start again? So obviously my thanks to BESIG and also to Pearson for inviting me. The talk is going to start eventually, I do assure you. And I think it is one of those life's great mysteries that the man who comes to talk to you about technology has all these problems right at the beginning. So I'm hoping things are going to go a lot more smoothly. You'll have to forgive me if I turn around occasionally to make sure that what I'm talking about is actually on the screen, okay? That's fine, that's good. That's very good. That's a bit of local flavour. That's very true, that one. I do that all the time. Laboriously backspacing. I wish I'd had the wit to make that. For those of you who missed it, I like to get a bit of local colour into my talks when I travel a little bit. I thought that was a really nice little screen. So part of what I'm going to talk about is connected with social media and things like that. But it's a little bit more broad than that. What I want to do is situate this talk a little bit in terms of the last few years, and by doing that, I bore you with my own personal history a little bit. So this is my personal history of technology. Okay, my first contact with a computer was in 1981, which was the year before I left school, and my school bought 2 computers. They were called ZX81. Does anyone remember the Spectrum? Just excellent, more people my age. Let's have a drink together then. The computers had rubber keys and 1 kilobyte of RAM, so they didn't actually do anything. But at my school, we learned how to program them to draw lines, which never seemed very useful to me. Prior to that, at my school, I'd done a computing course, and we would write programs on paper, and the teacher would take them to the local technical college and type them in and press run, and then go off for coffee and come back. And the first program I wrote was a Fahrenheit centigrade conversion program, but I forgot to put a stop in at the end. So this guy typed it in, pressed run, went off for coffee, came back to this mountain of papers with unfeasibly large temperatures on it. In 1984, I was at university, and like all good university students, I spent my money on something stupid, like a games machine. It was a Commodore. Anyone remember those? Red, green, and blue keys, and software on cassettes. It's amazing. The simplest game came on a cassette, and you would press load and play, and the cassette would go like for half an hour until the game loaded. Or, as invariably happened, didn't load and you had to rewind and start again. My first real computer was an Amstrad PCW85112, which of course means nothing to anyone. It had 512k of RAM, so we're getting somewhere very exciting by then. And it had 2 disk drives. One disk drive was for the operating system, and one was for the word processor. Yeah? It's so nice to see people nodding. I don't talk to anyone under 40 these days. So. I got my first real computer in 1990. It was so huge and heavy that 3 men came to deliver it. I kid you not. And it was so expensive that we got a free weekend in Mallorca just for buying it. And it came with a 500-page manual for DOS and a 500-page manual for Windows. About an hour after it had been delivered, I managed to delete the entire operating system from the computer, which is where I learned to read 500-page manuals. Not much to say about that era, really, not very exciting. I got my first mobile phone in '94. Does anyone still use a Nokia? Yeah? Lovely operating system on the Nokia. For all the beauties of smartphones, the Nokia is an amazing piece of equipment. My first internet connection in 1995 in Spain, I was paying about $25 an hour to be connected. And in those, because it was 9.8 kilobytes a second, so an hour was like loading half a web page. So there were 250,000 websites in 1995. So times have changed. Everything was very slow and a little bit dull. I had no friends to talk to. I still don't, but that's very much a separate issue which we won't go into. But for me it was a connect up, get your email, disconnect, big panic, how much have I spent? You know, $4 to get one email that meant nothing to me. I got my first laptop in 1998, again it cost me an extraordinary amount of money. All the money I've spent on computers over the year, I could have bought a nice house instead of living in a tent by the river. My first broadband connection in 1999, for me that was one of those amazingly sort of symbolic times. Being able to go to bed without turning the internet off was actually quite a shift in the way I use the internet, I think. Just being able to go and look things up whenever I wanted to. Nice moment. I still did, of course, unplug everything at night because I was so scared for the first month that I was going to get this enormous bill. I got my first smartphone in 2005. I say smartphone, it actually ran Windows, and Windows and smart don't really collocate too well, so it wasn't very exciting. But that was kind of the beginning of the changes that I think underpin a lot of what I want to talk to you about. And that's these changes, the last ones, the things that have happened in the last 5 years, that incredible pace of change. So we go through, anyone got an iPhone? Let's do the test. Okay, iPhones, yeah. Android phones. Yeah. I think the iPhones are just winning a little bit, or at least I like to think they are. I got my first Android phone in 2009. I've never really got on with Android because it's ugly. I mean, it's as simple as that really. There's nothing wrong with it. It's like the ugly second cousin to the iPhone. I got my first iPad in 2010. Anyone else on an iPad? Yeah, excellent. Another one of those revolutionary devices for me, something that I get out all the time when I'm on trains and planes. And I read a lot more and I watch a lot more films, things like that. And I do have an Android tablet, which I quite like. I don't buy these because I've got lots of money. It's my job is in technology, I guess. So please don't consider me overly extravagant. There's a graveyard of technology in my house somewhere that goes back 15 years of things that don't charge up anymore that I can't throw away. So the last few years have seen that huge pace of change, and for many of us, I think, including me, who spends all of his time working with technology, it's becoming increasingly difficult to keep up and to know exactly what's going on. I'm going to stop there because it is early morning and you're in danger of lapsing back into bedtime mode. So I'd like you to say hello to 2 or 3 people near you, and compare some of your history, personal landmarks in terms of technology, the things you've used, the things you've left behind, just for 2 or 3 minutes, just to make sure everyone's awake, okay?
It's amazing how knocking
Could I ask you to stop there? Okay, there's a lot to be said there, because I think that a lot of us have some kind of history with technologies, but we don't have the morning to do that. I thank you for your collaboration. There will be more opportunities coming up, so please bear with me. So the main point of the talk is to have a little look at what are rapidly becoming known as digital literacies or digital skills, and to examine a little bit why they're important to us as teachers, but also why they're important to the people we're teaching. So I think all of us have a very clearly delineated idea of what literacy is in the traditional form. In my day, when I grew up in UK, we talked about literacy and numeracy together. We called them the 3 R's. So that's reading, writing, and as you so rightly point out, arithmetic, which shows very much how literate we are in the UK. But in the last 2 or 3 years, as the technological revolution has gathered pace, people have started identifying a subset of literacies which are more reliant on those technologies. And that's what I'm going to go through. But first, there's a question. What is digital literacy? Anybody want to give me a bit of input here? I do have an answer. Good digital communication. Okay, the ability to... Okay, thank you very much. The ability to write with your thumb.
Very nice.
Yeah. At which I am singularly very, very bad. So I watch people do that two-thumb thing with editing. Anything else? The ability to communicate with technology. So we're definitely on the communication side. The ability to use PowerPoint in the classroom without asking your students to set up the laptop. It's a long sentence, but it's a very good one, thank you. Yeah. Any others? So this side of the room's gone, isn't it? I'm not getting the love back from this side.
What my kids have.
Knowing who to ask when you're stuck, I think is a very good point, because it's not a question, it's not about being an expert at everything, but it's knowing where the experts might be. That's a very good one, thank you. I'm going to give you a couple of definitions which I found when I first started researching this whole topic. The first one says that digital literacy is the ability to understand and use information in multiple formats from a wide range of sources when it's presented by computers. And although that definition has some goodness, there's a problem with one word in that definition, which is computers. Yeah, because increasingly that's not where people are in the digital world. Increasingly they're where that gentleman is, holding up his iPad to take a photograph, or using an iPhone. In the last 3 or 4 years we've become very much unchained, I think, from those desks and the desktop computers and the laptops, and you're more liable to find people interacting digitally through a phone or something mobile, or something handheld. So I think that's problematic. The second definition works much better for me. I read these out not because I don't think you can read, but I'm just worried about the people at the back of the room, okay? So the first part, digital literacy is the ability to locate, organise, understand, evaluate and create information using digital technology. I love that for one reason, and that is that it's all verbs. And verbs suggest people are doing things, which is good. Particularly if we want them to learn a language, it's good if they're doing things like listening and reading and writing and that kind of stuff. The second part of the definition says that digitally literate people can communicate and work more efficiently, especially with those who possess the same knowledge and skills. And when I read that, I thought, that actually sounds like speaking the same language, doesn't it? You know, if we speak the same language, we're more efficient. So this is a set of skills that when people share, they can get things done quickly. Lots of verbs, lots of getting stuff done. And in fact, this linguistic thing, by the way, that second definition is from Wikipedia and therefore is true, 100%. So this is part of a talk from a guy called Mark Prensky, who some of you may have seen or heard of. And Mark Prensky, to his misfortune, I think, was the person who coined the idea of digital immigrants and digital natives, now largely discredited as an idea. So digital immigrants being people my age who moved into technology and therefore not native speakers of what's called DSL, digital as a second language, in our field. And digital natives who grew up with it, so a younger generation. And whilst there is some truth in that, it's actually largely not a case of age, as I'm sure most of you are aware. My parents got their first computer in their 70s, and they know a lot more about computers now than lots of 20-year-olds that I know. But there is something in there, this linguistic thing is back in there, what Prensky said about nouns and verbs, about what we saw on the previous slide, is that some people view computers as problematic things. Some people view technology as a problem, in which case they're more likely to use nouns like the bloody printer and things like that. The computer's eaten my work again. Or even, as I've heard many times, the computer doesn't like me. Which I find a terrifying prospect in terms of what the computer's doing. So we tend to often, if we're not familiar or we're not comfortable with technology, we tend to problematize it and talk about it as a nasty beast that's out to get us. People who are much more comfortable with technology are using it very much to get things done, and they don't speak of it in problematic terms. Now, depending on who you're teaching, of course, they may be getting things done that you don't want them to do. I'm thinking of people in companies, for example, downloading movies when they should be working, or people on Facebook, as I'm sure you're aware. A lot of these are actually big problems with technology. So getting things done is good, but in the right moment. So that's a little overview. What I'd like to do now is to unpick this idea a little bit. I've just finished, this is a brief advert for 30 seconds, just finished writing a book about digital literacies. There you go. And in that book, we spent a long time picking the idea apart, so I'd like to explain to you what we mean by digital literacies, and then look a little bit about how they impact on you as a professional. So we've divided the literacies up into 4 categories. And the first category of literacies are literacies that focus on language. So we have print literacy, one with which we're all very, very familiar, reading on newspapers, magazines, whatever. But then we have things like texting and mobile literacy, where there's a slightly different genre of language coming out. And there was a time many years ago where people thought that text English was going to be the end of the English language. I'm sure some of you remember those, the outcry in the newspaper about falling standards and things like that. If you're like me, I mean, when I write a text message, I type it laboriously, letter by letter, with my tongue sticking out the side of my mouth. And they start with capital letters and end with full stops. And if I make a mistake halfway through, I could delete all the way back to correct it. David Crystal wrote a very, very good book about it. It's called Texting, the Great Debate. And he came to 2 conclusions, really, after doing his research. The first is that actually very little of what people write in English in text messages is abbreviated. So a lot of it is proper English. And the second was that people generally know the difference between a text message and a job application letter. Unsurprisingly. But it is a fact that there is a literacy there, and it's a new genre, and in fact it extends across lots of modern communications, particularly in the workplace. How do you send off a job application as an email? How does it start? Does it say, "Hi, I want your job"? Lol. The thing is, you see, there's not actually an answer. There isn't an answer to that. It's a genre which is not properly defined yet. Lots of companies use instant message capabilities to send each other quick queries. What's allowed in there and what isn't allowed? How many OMGs can you put in an electronic CV?
Sounds like a joke.
You know? So this is a genre, this texting mobile genre of short form communication, which is one that we still don't really know how it works. And on the rare occasion when I have to write an official email, I'm always sitting there for about 5 minutes uncomfortably typing hi or hello, and then looking at it and thinking, no, I don't even know this person. What I put. But you can't start an email with dear sir or madam, can you? Because that's just weird. Because then you'd have to put yours faithfully at the end. And that really would be very odd, especially if you've got lol in your signature. As I don't. There are other literacies in this, the ones that focus on language, things like hypertext literacy. Some of you may have seen Jim Scrivener's talk from IATEFL last year. It's called Hyperlink Heroin. And it's a lovely talk. It's about how we're singularly unable to focus on anything once we start on a web. You know, when you get about 3 words down, there's a link, and you go, oh, that looks interesting. And you click on that, and then halfway through the second paragraph on the next page, there's a link to a picture, so you follow, and then you find yourself looking up more pictures about the same thing. And before you know it, you're 20 pages away from the thing you were supposed to read. So that literacy of trying to keep people focused is actually a really important one too, of how do we keep people on message, on the right page, getting something done, rather than flitting around. We have other literacies which seem slightly alien to most people. Another literacy is code literacy, and that's the ability to play with technologies online. So, you know, if you set up a blog, if you're slightly code literate, you can do interesting things with that blog. You can embed videos in it, or you can add different things down the side. But it's the ability to actually transform technological solutions, which is going to be a very, very important skill. It is a very important skill already. There's a great BBC headline that said, coding is the new Latin. And in the UK now, there's a very cheap computer. It's called the Raspberry Pi. It's a very bare-bones computer. It costs about £25, I think. And they're trying to get computers back into the classrooms in the UK to give people these skills, because in the UK, we're very much losing out to global markets in terms of that kind of skill, coding, and being able to create things with technology. That's an increasingly important skill. There are ones perhaps we're more familiar with, like multimedia. That's something we're very familiar with. Gaming is another area. How many of you went to the BESIG online seminar about games that Graham Stanley did? Anyone? The BESIG committee did. And a few people had. That was an interesting one. Games are traditionally one of those things that have got a bit of a bad press, I think, in all sorts of fields, but particularly in ours, because when we talk about games, I think the first thing that comes into our head is bingo, which is unfortunate, I think, particularly in this day and age. So some of the more technologically based games can be very, very interesting. Simulations, things like that, very rewarding. And if you look around on the internet, you'll see the horrible word that I don't like, gamification. Has anyone come across that term? It's a little bit ugly. Has anyone seen the Khan Academy online? It's a classic example of gamification. This guy set up a maths academy online. There are lots of videos. And as you watch the videos, for young kids, you gain badges and points and things like that. When you do some exercises, you get more badges. And so what's happening there is that people want to get the badges because there's a natural competition in the gaming. So have you got the mega weekly watcher badge? And what the knock-on effect of that, of course, is everyone's studying maths like crazy, which is a very weird phenomenon. But people want those badges. You see it with adults. Anybody using Foursquare? Yeah, a handful of people. Foursquare is very addictive. When you get to a place, bear with me, this probably sounds like an alien speaking. When you get to a place, you get your phone out and you check into the place. Like, you can check into this location. Basically, you'll just say, I'm here. When you've been in a place more times than anyone else who's been in that place, you become mayor of the place. And in some places like bars and restaurants, when you're the mayor of the bar, you can get a free coffee. So there's actually a real world knock-on effect as well. So my partner and I were always, she forgets, so I become mayor of our house for the day. Celebratory cup of tea. And then I come away for 2 days, so I'm not the mayor anymore. And that does sound a little bit tragic, I do understand that. But even adults succumb very, very quickly to the idea of getting more points than someone else. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that game-style activity. So those are literacies that focus on language. The second set of literacies focus on information. They're probably the kind of bedrock of the new digital skills. And these are search, information, and tagging literacies. So search, the ability to find things on the internet primarily. How many people would consider themselves to be good searchers? Okay. Yeah, when I first started training people to do searches, I would find people, Gavin, there's nothing on the internet, someone said to me once in the training. And I just popped my head around the side of the screen. She typed Australia into Google and got 160 million results, which suggested that there was something on the internet, but that perhaps the query wasn't the most accurate query that you could do. And search for me is one of those huge skills. If you can search effectively, then you're kind of halfway there in any kind of technology use, I think. And that's kind of echoed by the way we deal with problems and issues these days, I think. You know, in the old days, you'd have to kind of buy magazines. When I first started using computers, if something went wrong with my computer, I had to buy a magazine or go to the library. Now I just go and describe that problem in Google, and someone else around the world doesn't have that problem. But you've got to be able to describe that problem effectively. And the other thing, but the search and information go together, because it's not just a question of finding things, it's a question of being able to evaluate those things in terms of usefulness. So usefulness for you as a teacher, usefulness for your clients as learners, usefulness for you preparing materials. You need some kind of criteria. You need to be able to look at those resources, the things you find, and evaluate whether they are good or bad, useful or useless, or whatever, depending on why you're searching, obviously. And the third thing that goes with that is this idea of tagging, or you'll increasingly see the word curating, is how do we look after all these things? I'm the world's worst person to be talking about this, I have to say. I have probably about 5,000 bookmarks in Firefox, which are all arranged in beautiful folders. Well, mostly, I have to tidy them up about once every 3 months. But I've never gone back and looked at any of them. They're all in there. I rediscover old website friends like new friends. You know, oh, that's an amazing website. And then I bookmark and I realise I've already got it bookmarked about 5 times if I bookmark. And I use a piece of software called Pocket, which some of you, anyone use Pocket? Yeah, Pocket's, oh, 2, excellent. Pocket's a great bit of software. As you're wandering around the internet, if you find interesting things, you can just click a little link in Firefox or Explorer, and it downloads that web page or that article for you to read offline. So what I do is I tend to bookmark these articles as I'm going through, and then I get them on my iPad when I'm sitting on the train. Or at least theoretically I do. What's happened now is I've now got about 500 articles sitting in there waiting to read, and at some point you have to give up, I think. But this is a skill, tagging, is keeping track of things, of describing them and putting them in boxes, electronic boxes, and knowing how to get back to them. And I think as the information flow increases, being able to do that is going to be a much more important skill, and one that I sincerely hope to develop. The third set of literacies, digital skills, focus on connections. How many people, let's go the wrong, how many people not using Facebook in the room? Oh, unusual that. Okay. If you're not using Facebook, are you using some other social network? Yeah, okay, fine. So here's the thing, in the last 3 or 4 years, this has become a much bigger issue, I think. 4 years ago, you would never have dreamt of walking down the road and seeing the cousin of a brother's friend and going up to them and saying, "Hi, I'm Gavin, would you like to see my holiday photos? This is where my mum lives." You just wouldn't do that, but we do it all the time on Facebook, don't we? You get those things, it says you've got 8, you know, somebody wants to be your friend, you have 2 mutual friends, and it's like they're your brother then, isn't it? You instantly want to be friends with them. It's a very weird thing. People forget also about the kind of social connections they have. So you have people in England, for example, losing their jobs because of Facebook. Guy says, I'm going to have a sickie today, forgetting that his boss is one of his friends on Facebook. And when you apply to go to a university or college in the UK now, one of the first things the admissions office does is look to your Facebook page to see if there are interesting photographs of you naked in a bath of baked beans or something. And then they decide whether they want you or not based on the kind of photographs you've got on Facebook. These are interesting times, I think. So these kind of participatory and personal literacies, what we're calling digital footprints, are actually very, very important. They're important to us as professionals, and they're important to the people we work with as well as professionals. It's very, very easy to create a monster out of yourself if you're not careful online. It can be done very quickly, I think. One of the chiefs of Google says that he reckons that by the year 2020, most of our kids will have to legally change their names to escape their digital pasts, which is kind of a frightening thought, really. But when we're engaging with these kind of communities and social networks, we are presenting an image of ourselves. And as a professional, that you need to be careful what you're doing with that image. But we're also being involved in cultural exchanges as well. These communities and online places bring us into contact, bring our learners into contact with other cultures and other belief systems. And we need to learn how to deal with those as well. When you're in a large group, you're going to be in a very, very mixed group. So these are connections, skills that focus on connections. And they're probably the ones that we take the least care of, I think, on a daily basis, perhaps. Just out of interest, does anyone think they've got an embarrassing photo of themselves on Facebook that they wouldn't like their clients to see? Okay. I haven't. The last part of this digital skill set is a focus on redesign or on reinventing things. What we've called remix. Remix is one of those things that's actually very, very hard to explain, so I have an example for you on this screen.
John is walking down the street, now there's a wall. White shorts, a barbershop, and close up all the walls. Now you will see that there are four of us. What's a slippery coat? Trading shades cannot distract him from my sleeping coat. And then it shows him putting glasses on 3 times. A plastic unibrow above his eyes. And we walk away. Where'd we go? There we are, we're all with him. Now he's alone. Let's watch these horses in the street. We'll get hit by that horse. As the horses have departed from the alleyway. Because of John and then the horses in the park. I'm not amused, but George and Ringo are. By the horseman's
I particularly like the use of the word horse montage.
Looks like John is saying bye to you soon again. Ride our horses past the street into the stage. Well, that's a stupid place for a stage. Let's go here instead. Shots of John cannot distract me from that table there. What kind of restaurant is this? It's all outdoors. It's time for everyone to go.
Classic, I'm sure you'll agree. Now it's my second favourite. If you want to see the best one, then go to YouTube and type in literal, as in literal version, literal total eclipse of the heart. That truly is magnificent. Now that's a very, very clever bit of video, depending on how old you are, obviously. You've got the original video to the song, which is pretty crap visually, as you saw. But some people have taken the trouble to rewrite the lyrics to describe what's happening in the video. They've then sung it in Liverpudlian accents, sounding like the Beatles, which is not a morning's work. You know, that's a big job. If you're my age, you find that funny. If you're young-ish and have never heard of the Beatles, all you think is, didn't they make crap music videos in the 1970s? And couldn't they have done better with the lyrics? It's like, this remix, some of you may have seen, there's a great one of Bush and Blair singing Our Perfect Love to each other. Has anyone seen that? It's a lovely, lovely bit of video. Beautifully lip-synced. It's becoming increasingly tricky to tell what's real and what isn't real in the digital world. And that's another skill, I think, and that skill is based on all kinds of things, but primarily on world knowledge and experience, and also perhaps some digital clues. Okay, so that was what is digital literacy or digital skills. We're going to move on to Are You Digitally Literate, which gives you a chance to talk to each other again. On the next screen there are some statements, okay? In your small groups, if you can answer yes to any of the statements, please just give your partners a little bit more information about that particular one, okay? So 3, 2, 1, off you go.
What happened?
Wonderful. The next screen of the Are You Digitally Literate survey is the elimination round. Some of you will be leaving the room, I'm afraid, after the next screen. On the next screen there are some logos of websites that perform various, what might be called Web 2 functions. What I'd like you to do in your group is choose one of those websites and tell your colleagues what it does. They'll then choose one and tell you what it does. The first person not to be able to complete the mission has to leave the room. Okay? Okay. So you want to get started quickly. 3, 2, 1, off you go.
So we have to take turns to tell what the link to distribute the Facebook.
Gavin Dudeney
That's the place that we go to now because BESIG is on there and it wasn't.
Exactly. What campus is a place that I've never gone. I don't know anybody who has LinkedIn is the place where you promote people who are really famous and then you give them your service.
Endorsement place where everyone is. What is it you do? Endorsing?
It was horrible. It was horrible. It was like this spam. And I got it. I just clicked and I thought it would stop, and then it went on.
I feel horrible because I'm not re-endorsing the people that are endorsing me because they expect me to go endorse them without. They forget it. They don't do it.
Okay, just going to ask you to stop there. I'm sure a lot of you recognise a lot of these websites. We have a Twitter, short message service online. We have a TeacherTube, which is a collection of teacher or education videos like YouTube. Facebook, obviously. LinkedIn, which is like Facebook for adults. and a few other. And the question I got asked once, which I loved, is, what's the golf ball? Which is, of course, Wikipedia. So, on the final screen of the Are You Digitally Literate discussion, we're back to the statements again. So if you can answer yes to the statements, just give your colleagues a little bit of extra information. You don't have to answer the last one, of course, which is a bit cheeky.
Sort of. I'm not in Twitter party. I've got one of those huge big old school ones. It's like a ginormous box.
The only thing I watch sports on TV, I use that, and I watch the elections for 14 hours straight the other night, which was a good TV. I loved it. I watched the blocks the whole time just to watch them sit. Oh, really?
It's very tiring. You got to be up until 5.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So, and I also watch sports.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you to stop there. Time is running on. I actually did meet my partner online, and through a shared love of music rather than in a catalogue, just in case you're having bad thoughts about me. So if you can answer yes to a lot of these things, does it make you digitally literate or skilled in that area? I'm not entirely sure, but I suspect that if you're aware of these things going on, there's a certain amount of skill base there, and that's probably an important place to start. The next question I have is, why is it important? And the question you may have is it important? But since it's my talk, we're going to stick with why is it important. I think there are a few key reasons. Really really having microphone fun this morning. There are a few key reasons. The first one, because shift happens. At this moment, there's this little Mexican wave of laughter. I pretend I don't know what you're laughing at. We all have a jolly good time, and there we go. One of the big shifts, and a classic example for me would be Spain, where I lived for 23 years until last year, is the way that Spain is shifting slowly towards what's rapidly becoming the norm, which is a knowledge economy. An economy based around information, about moving data and interpreting data. And you'll have seen it in other places, India with call centres, which are now moving elsewhere, to the Philippines and things. And India taking care of 80% of the Fortune 500 US accounting procedures, data being sent over every day, this kind of thing. So Spain going from a largely agrarian economy to a tourist-based economy in the 50s, which lasted right up until the 90s, when other places became much cheaper to go to, and now Spain's very much one of those economies that's dealing with information and data. And ensuring people have those skills is incredibly important, I think. And you'll see changes happening in education systems now, which reflect the change, that economic change. So that's one reason. There's been a big change in us and the way we work as societies, professionally, at the very least. The second change has been the big change in technology. This is Google from the late 80s. So basically the idea was you would fill in your query, you stick a stamp on it, you send it off, and 30 days later you get some kind of data back from Google. Now if you compare that, this is 89, so we're only talking, what, 23 years ago? You compare that now, I go along to Google, I put in a query and it says, 135,000 results, 0.06 seconds. So that's a big shift, I think. That's not real, by the way, in case you're wondering. It never actually happened. But what did happen is the increase in speed, which is the important thing, I think, for us, is getting to things a lot quicker. So that's another shift. A third shift has been the big shift in mobility. On your left, a mobile computer from the 80s, etc., etc. And that's one of those amazing shifts, because if you're carrying around a phone like this and it's connected to the internet, you're actually carrying around one of the most amazing gadgets ever made. And a typical smartphone has twice the same computing power as the first two NASA space missions combined. They went to the moon on less computing power. Amazing things, which of course we often don't take advantage of, I think, in our field. Mobile can break down though. This is what happened to me last night.
Siri, wo kann ich ein Bier finden?
Brilliant. Just trying to find a beer, couldn't help you out at all. I know that phrase in so many languages, it's a very important one. But mobile's a big thing. The biggest shift, perhaps, is in the kind of people that we're dealing with, I think, on a daily basis. Not just in terms of what they're doing and the way their jobs are changing and the types of communication they have to enter into in English, but in the number of distractions and things that also come their way when we're dealing with them. Their inability to, have an empty hand, all sorts of other things. There's always a BlackBerry in one hand and the home iPhone in the other one, iPad under the desk. And so that's been a really big shift too. And all these shifts have combined, I think, to make our job a little bit more demanding. So I have two more questions before I finish, and I promise I will finish as quickly as I can. The first question is, what does it mean for you? And I think it means adding a veneer of technical skill or technical awareness on top of what we do. Traditionally, as teachers, we're skilled in those two spheres. We have our pedagogical knowledge on one side and our content knowledge on the other side, and that's what we do. We bring those two things together in our day-to-day job to help people learn English. This is 2/3 of what's now a pretty famous model by Mr. and Kohler called the TPAC model. And what that model proposes for educators is putting a level of technological knowledge into the mix. And so ideally we're aiming for that tiny little bit in the middle, which is a combination of technological, pedagogical and content knowledge. Because combining those three things together allows us to give a more rounded service to the people we're dealing with. It doesn't mean you have to become a computer expert. It just means you need to be aware of how things work, primarily online. But this model is quite a famous one now. In terms of what those digital skills, sorry, do you want me to go back? You'll be able to download the slides anyways. In terms of what that means to you as a teaching professional, I think these skills, the digital skills, fit very nicely with a lot of what we do, or present challenges for a lot of what we do. So on the search and information and tagging side, we have good traditional teacher skills like research, lesson planning, professional development. How many people develop themselves? It's a very odd expression. How many people are engaged in professional development online? Professionally or socially, also in Twitter and Facebook and things like that? Yeah, quite a few. And also that skill of managing the flow. More and more information is going to be coming our ways as professionals. More information, more publications, more books, more teaching approaches, more seminars, more webinars, more blogs, more wikis. We do have to learn those skills to manage that flow of information, just to keep ourselves up to speed with what's happening in our own chosen area professionally. Those focus on language skills equate to what we do in the classroom in terms of the materials we create to take into the classroom, how we engage with different styles of learners in the sense of multimedia, things like that. But they also speak a little bit about our professional image. The materials we use, the materials we design reflect on us, I think. So that there is a need to produce materials which are professionally attractive and useful. Focus on connections are also, as I said before, I think a little bit about our professional image. If somebody looked at your Facebook page or your LinkedIn page, if someone was thinking of hiring you as a teacher, would those pages say, he or she is the person I really need for my company, or would they say, doesn't look very serious, or how did they get all those beans in that bath? And this kind of thing can have an impact on your professional development and your career development as well. As I said, it's very, very easy to create a bad identity online. It's an absolute nightmare trying to get rid of that identity online once it's there. So things we need to be careful with. I'm yet to decide what use Remix has, apart from possibly creative accounting in terms of professional English, but I'm sure it fits in there somewhere. So for you, I think, for us as professionals, these skills all do come into play in what we do on a daily basis in some form or another, to some degree or another. And adding in that circle of technological knowledge is a useful thing to think about. You don't all have to go and do a degree in computing science, I hasten to add. What does it mean for the people you deal with? I think one of the things about technologies themselves is that they're often used for no apparent reason. This is another model, it's called the SAMA model by a guy called Quentin Allura. And he's looking at, basically, when we're working with technologies and working with these skills, we should be aiming for uses of technology and skills that are somewhere towards the top. Things that allow us to modify the kind of activities we traditionally do, or redefine those activities for a more modern era. And you see that we have that lovely app that won the David Riley Award yesterday. This kind of thing is a semi-transformational use of technology. It does something better than can be done on paper. So we need to be thinking about those kind of higher order skills, because that's where those digital skills really engage. And for the people we deal with, there are very, very similar applications with these skills. So for learners, they also need to learn how to manage their flow, and they need to know how to read and digest an awful lot of English very, very quickly and very, very succinctly. Lots of people will be in that situation where the flow of information is actually becoming a little bit too much for them. Some of the activities we do with them perhaps show them how to manage that flow a little bit better. They also need to be able to produce things, so focus on language. They need to be able to produce papers. I went to an interesting talk recently, was looking at statistics of Brazilian academics getting published, and the statistics were very, very low because the level of writing is so low. So one of the skills we need to work on, perhaps with some people, is presentation skills, research skills, writing skills. A lot of this stuff can be done very, very effectively through technology, and also very comfortably in a slightly less threatening way. I'm thinking here about people recording themselves on devices, rather than standing up in front of big groups like me, having the chance to rehearse in quiet rooms and record themselves on digital devices and mobile phones. Lots of little things that can enhance people's use of language. And of course the connections also reflect back on the people we teach. If we ask people to join us on Facebook, for example, so follow me on Facebook because I'll be posting links to extra reading, things like that. What happens when you post something not quite so professional and they've got your Facebook page open on their desk at work? So even the things we do online, if we're connected to people, can impact on their professional image too. It's a complicated world out there. I'm going to finish, I think. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. These are a couple of things that have come up now in BESIG. The first is gaming, and I think I mentioned that before. I think gaming does have a lot of applications in the professional English arena. And I'm really delighted to have a chance to watch that seminar that Graham gave recently, because there were lots of insights about how games can be used in professional English. And the other one, to go back to the David Riley one, is the N-learning, the mobile and handheld learning thing. I think these are two areas where we can really make an impact. If people are carrying around iPads and tablet computers, it's very, very easy, theoretically, for us to get content onto those devices for them. When I caught the plane yesterday, I listened to an audio book. It's the first one I've listened to ever, which surprised me. But these devices are great things that people get out all the time. Being able to get language onto them in all sorts of ways, blogs that people are interested in, subscriptions to magazines, audio files, and getting them to engage more. I think Ian was in the EL Gazette last week talking about the importance of listening in the business context. We can only provide them with so many opportunities, but having them carrying these things around provides them with a lot more opportunities. So these are the two areas I'd be looking at in the future. I'm actually going to stop because I think we're almost out of time. We have about 5 minutes for questions. So if anybody has any questions or comments, I'd be more than happy to hear them or respond to them. Ready for coffee. In that case, tell me when to stop. Okay. Excellent. In that case, if you are all ready for coffee, I'd just like to thank you very, very much for your time. I'd like to thank Pearson for sponsoring me again, and BESIG for inviting me, and I look forward to meeting you over the next day and a half, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
On behalf of BESIG, IATEFL BESIG, we would like to thank Gavin very much and have a small token of our appreciation to hand over.
Fantastic. They know me so well.